Did Anne Boleyn attack Jane Seymour and rip a necklace off her throat as the two of them fought for Henry VIII's love? Or is this story of a royal catfight, which has been brought to life in shows like The Tudors, merely an invention? In today's episode of History Calling, we're heading back to late 1535 and early 1536 to look at the love triangle between Henry VIII and his second and third wives, and at what the evidence has to say about this scandalous incident. The story that Anne and Jane came to blows over a necklace originates in a book called The History of the Worthies of England, written by an Englishman named Thomas Fuller. In it, he says, quote, "It is currently traditioned that at her first coming to court, Queen Anne Boleyn, espying a jewel pendant about her, Jane's, neck, snatched thereat, desirous to see, the other unwilling to show it, and casually hurt her hand with her own violence. But it grieved her heart more when she perceived it the king's picture by himself bestowed upon her, who from this day forward dated her own declining and the other's ascending in her husband's affection." It's a great story, but there are numerous problems with this source. For a start, Fuller wasn't born until about 1608, and the History of the Worthies of England was only published in 1662, though the edition I was able to find online is from 1840. This was the year after Fuller's death, his son brought the project to completion, and well over a century after the incident it claims to report. Second, this story is very light on details. When and where was it supposed to have happened, for instance? Fuller dates it only to Jane's first coming to court, but as I'll show you in a minute, that is impossible. He also offers no source for his information, instead saying only that it was currently traditioned at the time he wrote it down. Nor is there a more contemporary record of Anne attacking Jane in this way. Now, sometimes traditions do turn out to have a kernel of truth to them. The rumours that Richard III had a curved spine were vindicated by the discovery of his skeleton in 2012, for instance. However, that discovery also showed the fallacy in the many stories about what had happened to his body and where it had been buried. See my video all about what happened to his corpse to learn more about that. We cannot trust a tradition just because it dates to the 1660s. That's still far too long after 1536, the last possible year this incident could have happened, to give it any ring of authenticity. Fuller cannot have spoken to anyone who was alive at the time and might have recounted the story to him, and he cites no documentary evidence. It's all just hearsay, or, dare I say it, an invention of his own. We should also be wary of Fuller because he provides other information which is either highly suspect or demonstrably false. As I've said, he claims that this incident occurred when Jane first came to court, but Jane had been a lady-in-waiting to Catherine of Aragon, Henry's first wife, in around 1529, then moved on to Anne's household. She'd therefore been at court for about 6 years by late 1535, and had first appeared there when Henry was head over heels in love with Anne, but not yet her husband. The story is a mishmash of details from entirely different points in Anne, Henry, and Jane's timelines. Fuller also says that Jane possessed excellent beauty, something no one alive at the time claimed and which her portrait by Hans Holbein tends to disprove. And he wrote that she died on the 14th of October 1337 instead of the 24th of October 1537 and was buried in Windsor Chapel. The dating details are perhaps just typos, certainly the year is one, but the chapel in question is actually called St. George's Chapel, though it is within the Windsor Castle complex. All are details which would have been relatively easy to check, even in the 1660s. Fuller's work does not suggest careful research, and he instead comes off as a writer who liked a good story with the need for evidence to support it being no more than optional. His claim that Anne dated her downfall to the seizure of this necklace is also just fancy. We don't know when she started to suspect that Jane was going to supplant her, and Henry was outwardly supporting her, demanding that the Spanish recognise her as Queen of England as late as April 1536, just a few weeks before her arrest, trial and execution. Fuller is not a good source. Fortunately, there are some simple ways to spot well-written versus badly written history, and to help you do so, I've created a free download which you can get from my website, historycallingofficial.com, when you sign up to my mailing list. It's linked below for you, so you hopefully never waste your money buying something as shoddy as Thomas Fuller's work. For even more from me, why not hit those like and subscribe buttons too, so that you never miss an upload here on my YouTube channel, and check out my Patreon site where I share bonus material including early access to ad-free videos, mini podcasts and recommendations for other great history content on the web. Alternatively, I also have memberships switched on here on YouTube as well, and you can learn more about that and join up if you wish by clicking the join button under videos or on my channel homepage. Finally, there's my Amazon storefront where I provide curated lists of history-themed movies, TV shows, books and gifts. All the links you'll need are below. Fuller aside, is there any other evidence to suggest that something like this might have happened? At first glance, the answer would appear to be yes, for there are two other reports that the pair fought. Nicholas Sander, or Sanders, writing in the reign of Elizabeth I, claimed that Anne blamed her January 1536 miscarriage on finding Jane in Henry's lap, suggesting an extremely tense relationship between the two women. Sander is a woeful source, though. He was born in Surrey in about 1530 and therefore never knew either woman, both of whom died during his childhood. By the time he was writing, many decades after both queens' passings, he was also living in exile due to his Catholicism, and he had an axe to grind with the English Protestant regime, which Anne and Jane both represented. Anne had been a cause of the English Reformation and was Elizabeth's mother, while Jane was the mother of the hyper-Protestant Edward VI. His work is full of ridiculous stories too. Among other tall tales, it is from him that we get the lies that Anne had a fully fledged sixth finger, plus a hideous wen on her face, and gave birth to a deformed fetus in 1536. He is not credible. Another person who apparently reported tensions between the Queen and Jane Seymour was Jane Dormer, Duchess of Feria, a former lady-in-waiting to Mary I. In a posthumous biography of her, written by a man named Henry Clifford, who was in her employ towards the end of her life, she died in 1612, we again read the claim that Anne found Jane on Henry's knee and blamed the incident for her miscarriage, along with the added detail that, quote, there was often much scratching and by-blows between the Queen and her maid. Dormer, however, was only born in 1538, after both Anne and Jane were dead, and if we assume that she repeated these stories to Clifford, because remember, this isn't even a source she wrote herself, then she was at best regurgitating the stories of others. We therefore have a case of double hearsay with 3 serious time lags to boot. Anyone who told Dormer about Anne and Jane will have been remembering, perhaps very inaccurately, incidents from decades earlier, and by the time Dormer was repeating them to Clifford, she will have been recalling conversations which also took place many years prior too. Clifford then wrote up his biography of her after her death, when he couldn't even double-check his information with her. Yes, Jane Dormer knew Mary I, but Mary wasn't at court in late 1535 and early 1536 to see how her current and future stepmothers were interacting with each other. And in any case, Clifford does not state where the information about Anne and Jane came from. He doesn't even claim that Dormer told him about the scratching and by-blows. We're just left to assume that she was his source. Like Sander, from whom Dormer and/or Clifford may have copied the story of Jane Seymour on Henry's knee because Sander's work was published in 1585, the Duchess of Feria was also a Catholic living in exile during the reign of Elizabeth, and she can have had no love for either Anne Boleyn or Jane Seymour. So even if she did spread this story, we have to consider her own bias in doing so. There are numerous errors in the Clifford biography of Dormer too, making it even less secure as a source. It supports the idea that Anne cheated on her husband with her brother and other courtiers, gives an inaccurate date of death for her, and is the basis of the story that she was only 28 when she died, though I have a whole video about her birth year, linked on screen and below, demonstrating that she was much more likely to be about 35. What's more, the only contemporary source from the time of the miscarriage, which discusses how Anne explained it, says that she blamed it on the shock of hearing that Henry had fallen from his horse a few days earlier. There is no mention of any physical altercation between Anne and Jane in reports from the 1530s. It seems a lot more likely that Fuller was embellishing the stories spread by Sander. It's even possible he saw the manuscript of Clifford's work, though that is a stretch, I will admit. So there's no contemporary evidence that Anne and Jane ever came to blows. But is the story of Jane goading her mistress by wearing a necklace gifted to her by the king even plausible, given what we know about the early days of Henry and Jane's relationship? Well, Henry did indeed give her gifts in an attempt to woo her. On the 10th of February 1536, Imperial Ambassador Eustace Chapuis told his master, Charles V of Spain, that there were many reports that Henry, quote, has lately made great presents to a Mistress Seymour, which is how Chapuis misunderstood how to pronounce Seymour. We also know that Henry liked to give his ladies his picture set into jewellery, because he gave Anne his images in bracelets when he was courting her. However, there is every indication that Jane was very careful in how she dealt with the king's attentions, and she was known to refuse his gifts in order, ostensibly, to protect her honour. In late March 1536, he sent her a letter and a purse full of money, but Jane's response was to kiss the letter, then return it to the king's messenger, unopened. She then dropped down onto her knees and, quote, begged the royal messenger to entreat the king in her name to consider that she was a well-born damsel, the daughter of good and honourable parents, without blame or reproach of any kind. There was no treasure in this world that she valued as much as her honour, and on no account would she lose it, even if she were to die 1,000 deaths. That if the king wished to make her a present of money, she requested him to reserve it for such a time as God would be pleased to send her some advantageous marriage. If Jane was so precious about protecting her reputation as late as the end of March, around 5 weeks before Anne's arrest, then the idea that she would accept a necklace from Henry, which displayed his picture and could not be passed off as anything but a love token, then wear it in front of the Queen, seems ridiculous. The report of Henry's letter and the money, by the way, comes from a letter of the 1st of April 1536 written by Chapuis to Charles V, and Chapuis had double-sourced his information from the Marchioness of Dorset and a Master Geliot. What he says is therefore much more secure than anything Fuller, Sander, Dormer or Clifford came up with decades later. My conclusion then is that while we can't rule out that Henry gave Jane a pendant with his picture in it, and I certainly have no trouble imagining Anne taking a swipe at her rival for this or something else, there's not actually any convincing contemporary evidence or even any well-sourced later evidence to confirm such stories. Fuller is a very weak source, full of other known errors, as are the other two writers who reported tensions between the two women. Unfortunately, more modern historians, particularly amateur historians, have followed Fuller's lead in repeating this story with little or no analysis to show how suspect it is, and that has allowed it to proliferate. Its appearance in shows like The Tudors has only added to this problem. I'm curious to hear what you make of all this, though. Do you think Anne attacked Jane either over the necklace or anything else? Let me know in the comments below, and for more on these two women, try one of these videos next. I'll be back next week, and until then, keep learning.